Good job. Now your scene is beautifully coloured in, let's add some texture to it. For that, we need to leave coat mode and go into style mode. To leave a mode, select the exit button in the top right of the screen. Or you can use a shortcut. Hold L1 and press circle. Just like scoping out of a group. Now use the Modes menu to switch over to Style mode. The Style mode icon is an S-shaped brushstroke. All sculptures and paintings in Dreams are made up of flecks, and Style mode is where we manipulate them. For example, notice how the objects in this scene look smooth. That's because their flecks are small and tightly packed together. We can make them more textured with the Looseness tool. Select the Looseness tool. It looks like a blurry circle. Now try using R2 to loosen some of the foliage in the scene. Don't hold back. As you can see, loosening sculptures and paintings means their flecks become more obvious. If you think they're getting too loose, press triangle to make the tool subtractive and tighten them up again with R2. Or you can just use the left directional button to undo. Don't forget to loosen up the river too. We'll need it in the following steps. Carry on loosening the objects in the scene. When you're happy, proceed to the next step. Wonderful. Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colours menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Let's see. Ah, yes. How about shiny wax? Wax finishes are translucent, and the shine will give the river a reflective surface that will catch the light. Apply the finish as before using R2. Remember that you can revert your changes by switching to subtractive mode with triangle or by using undo. Try editing the finish on other groups and objects in the scene. Continue to the next step when you're ready. Our river looks nice and shiny now, but something's missing. It doesn't flow like water does. But there's a magical tool for that in effects mode. It's called the Flow tool. Leave Coat mode if you haven't already, and enter effects mode. The effects mode icon has some twinkly stars on it. Alongside the Flow tool, you'll notice other animated effects that you can apply to sculptures or paintings. But for now, we'll pick the Flow tool. Its icon is a tap, or a faucet if you're from the US. Press X over the Flow tool to select it. And use R2 to apply it to the river. Isn't that lovely? In effects mode, you can preview the flow effect even when time is paused. But if you leave effects mode, you'll need to click R3 to see the effects in action. When the river's flowing at the right speed, you may notice something a bit odd. It's flowing the wrong way. Let's fix that using another tool found in Style mode, the Comb tool. Leave effects mode using L1 and circle, then go back into Style mode via the Modes menu. The Comb tool icon is some wavy lines. Select it with X. Now we're going to make the river flow the correct way. How do we do that? You guessed it. Hold R2 to comb the flecks of the river so they go in the right direction. We're no longer in effects mode, so we can't see the flow effect animating. But just click R3 to start time, and you'll be able to see it again. The key is to move your imp in the direction you'd like the flex to flow. A bit like you're combing the river's hair. Very stylish. Let go of R2 when you're happy with the flow direction. And now you can see the river is going the correct way. But if it isn't, just undo and try again. When you're happy with the speed and direction of the river, click L3 to rewind time. Then it's off to the next step. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in style mode, head there now using the modes menu. Open the Flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? When you choose a fleck type, it'll automatically select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. Grab it with R1. And while you're grabbing, spin around it with the left or right stick. The paint strokes look a bit flat, don't they? You can select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. This scene is really coming together. Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in Style Mode, head there now using the Modes menu. Open the Flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? When you choose a fleck type, it'll automatically select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. Grab it with R1. And while you're grabbing, spin around it with the left or right stick. The paint strokes look a bit flat, don't they? You can only see them well from certain angles. We can make it a bit more billowy and three-dimensional using the Impasto tool. In the Style menu, select the Impasto tool, then hold R2 to apply it to the smoke. Watch as the individual flecks of the painting become more three-dimensional. To see it better, use the grab cam to spin around the smoke again. You can also press undo and redo to compare the smoke with and without Impasto. Now that you've mastered Impasto, the last style tool we're going to use is the Ruffle tool. The Ruffle tool icon looks like a lot of lines going in different directions. It will randomly rotate the flecks so they're not as orderly. It works in the same way as the other two tools. Select it with X, then use R2 to apply it. And switch the tool to subtractive by pressing triangle. Ruffle makes quite a difference, doesn't it? Why not see if you can animate the smoke using the flow tool in effects mode? When you're happy, go to the next step of the tutorial. Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. We can do that using something called the Glow tool. So head back to the Modes menu and into Coat mode. The Glow tool has an icon that looks like a little sun. Select it with X. Then move your view over to the cottage for a closer look. Now position your view so that you can see the door and the window of the cottage. Then hold R2 over the window in the door to make it glow. Go on, give it some welly. Whoa, that's too bright. Let's press triangle to make the tool subtractive. Then use R2 to reduce the glow. Maybe you could try tinting the window to change the colour of the light. See what you think. Have a play with the glow tool, and then move on to the next step when you're ready. The scene looks so alive now, and Connie's in love with her new home. It's hard to believe that this scene used to be all grey and blocky. Let's try something. How different did we actually make it? To see, we can use a special trick. Press square to open the menu, and then take a look in the Show Hide section. The Show Hide icon looks like an open eye. It can be found in most of the mode's menus. In the Show Hide menu, you can make all sorts of different objects visible or invisible. It only works in edit mode, so your scene will still look the same in play mode. Some of them are on by default, and some are switched off. Coat, Style and Effects is one of the options which is on by default. Its icon is a combination of the icons for all three of those modes. Try turning it off by pressing X over it. Wow, what an amazing difference. That shows you how powerful these tools really are. Using Coat, Style and Effects, you can make even the most boring block come alive. Practice using the tools and see what you can come up with. When you're finished, go to Play Mode in the Options menu and walk Connie into her beautiful new home. This will complete the tutorial. It looks like Cuthbert is in a spot of bother. Connie needs our help to get across these platforms so she can rescue Cuthbert. So how about we add a little handmade animation to get her there? You don't need to go into play mode to see that Connie won't be able to make this jump. So let's animate that floating ledge down to her using an action recorder. Action recorders are super easy to use. Just stamp one in your scene, and it will record anything you move with the imp. And we mean anything. It'll even record you moving or tweaking gadgets. We'd better get going. Connie's getting really impatient. You know what cones are like. Go to the Assembly menu. Press a square button if it's not already open. Then head to the Animate menu. The Animate icon is a clapperboard, that thing they use in movies before the director says, action. Now you get to be the director, and you can use these tools and gadgets to animate objects. Select the action recorder, the icon with a film strip and a plus sign on it. You'll now have an action recorder gadget on your imp. Stamp it down, somewhere near the floating ledge. A progress bar will appear at the top of the screen, along with a record button on the right. Also, your imp will turn red. This means you're ready to start recording. Don't worry, recording won't start until you begin moving or changing things. When you're ready, grab the floating ledge with R2. Move it slowly towards Connie using the motion sensor function or the sticks. You'll notice that the bar starts to fill, recording your every move. Don't worry, It's not a time limit. The bar fills up as a visual indicator of something being recorded, so take your time. When you let go of R2, the recording will pause. If you move your view or use the grab cam, that won't be recorded. But if you've started time with R3, recording will continue when you let go of R2. That's why it's important to rewind or pause time before recording anything. That way, your action recorder only contains what you put into it. When you've finished recording, select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Or you can use the shortcut, L1 and circle button, to exit the action recorder. Your imp will go back to normal to show that recording has stopped. Click R3 to play back your animation. Handmade animations are always a bit wobbly, but practice makes perfect. Calibrating your imp can help when using the motion sensor function. Just hold your controller in a comfortable position, then hold the Options button for a few seconds. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit a recorded animation. Anything you record is stored in the Action Recorder gadget. If you hover over the floating ledge, the Action Recorder will pulse. Select the Action Recorder with X, and dashed lines will appear on the objects animated with it. It'll also show the animation path. That's this dashed line. If you're not happy with your animation, redoing it is easy. First, rewind time with L3. Then hover over the Action Recorder gadget, hold L1 and press X. Now we can start recording again. Select the Retake button in the context menu to replace the old animation. Now you can record a new one. Move the platform so it stops in front of Connie. You can undo actions you perform using the left directional button, but it won't undo any time that has passed. So it's better to use the Retake button to undo animations. Move the floating ledge from the upper platform down to Connie. Don't worry if the animation's too slow or too fast. We can fix that later. Make sure you press the Stop Recording button when you're done. Spend a little time practicing with the Action Recorder. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak your animation. Another way to edit animations is to tweak them. Hold L1 and press the square button over the action recorder gadget to open its tweak menu. Here you can see all the tweaks for the action recorder. By default, the playback mode is set to loop, so it plays the animation over and over again. But you can set them to play once, sustain, or to ping pong. Once will play the whole animation just one time. Sustain will play the animation for as long as the action recorder has power. If it loses power, it will stop. Then it will continue from that point when it's powered again. Ping pong plays the animation forward once, and then plays it in reverse. Then forward, then backwards, and so on. That sounds like a good option for our floating ledge. Select ping pong with X. Click R3 to start time and play the animation. You can also change the animation speed to make it slower or faster. Grab the slider with X and use your imp to change the speed. If you want to explore more of the action recorder tweaks, you can. If you hover over any button for a few seconds, a more info tip will explain what that tweak does. To close the tweak menu, just hold L1 and press the circle button anywhere over it. And of course, you can undo any changes you make by pressing the left directional button. Switch to play mode to test your changes. When you're ready, come back to edit mode and start the next step. Now that Connie's made it up to the higher platform, how will she get back down to the next one? First, rewind time with L3. You probably already know about cloning objects, but do you know that you can clone their animations along with them? I'm sure you remember how to clone, but if not, just hold L1 and grab the ledge you animated with R2. Once you've made the clone, release L1, then move the ledge to the other side and release R2 to place it. Not only did you clone the ledge, but you also cloned its animation. Click R3 to start time. Now we just need to flip it so that it moves in the correct direction. First, make sure you rewind time. grab the platform with R2. Then click L3 to flip it horizontally. Depending on where you grabbed it, you might have to move it closer to the other platform after flipping. You may also need to realign it with triangle before releasing R2 to put it back down. Now click R3 to start time, and the platform should move in opposite directions. Both animations are stored in the same action recorder. So if you retake or delete the action recorder, it will affect both animations. Now go into play mode and see if Connie can make it across both gaps. Switch back to edit mode when you're ready to move on. Now let's get Connie to Cuthbert and get them through the door. I've placed a shiny helper cube. Let's call it Cuthbot. That holds up the next platform, but it's not very animated at the moment. To get it to walk back and forth towards the exit, we need to use Record Possession. It allows you to possess puppets and record a performance with them. Open the Assembly menu, then go to the Animate menu. Select Record Possession. It's the button with the sock puppet icon. Now that Connie's made it up to the higher platform, how will she get back down to the next one? First, rewind time with L3. Animate R2 to with that. Now let's get Connie to Cuthbert and get them through the door. I've placed a shiny helper cube. Let's call it Cuthbot. That holds up the next platform, but it's not very animated at the moment. To get it to walk back and forth towards the exit, we need to use Record Possession. It allows you to possess puppets and record a performance with them. Open the Assembly menu, then go to the Animate menu. Select Record Possession. It's the button with the sock puppet icon. Your imp can now possess the puppets in the scene. In the Context menu, you'll see the Count-In button. When this is selected, you'll get a 3-second count-in before recording starts. Press R2 over the Cuthbot to possess the puppet and start the countdown. When the count reaches 0, the possession recorder begins recording. Unlike the action recorder, it records constantly. So time will be recorded even when the cube isn't moving. Walk the Cuthbot around the obstacles to the final platform. Pause for a moment, turn around, then walk back to where the Cuthbot started. Starting and ending at the same place will help to make the animation loop smoothly. Press the circle button to depossess. You'll notice that the recording pauses when you depossess. Select Stop Recording in the Context menu to exit the possession recorder. Once you've stopped recording, click L3 to rewind time, then R3 to start time, and watch what you've recorded. In the last step, I'll show you how to edit the recorded possession. You may have noticed the possession recorder gadget has appeared next to the Cuthbot. When you're using Record Possession, this gadget appears the moment you press the Stop Recording button. Select it with X to view the animation path. The Possession Recorder gadget also lets you edit and tweak the animation. Hold L1 and press X over the Possession Recorder to scope in and edit it. Just like the action recorder, you can choose to retake the animation by selecting the button in the Context menu. To stop editing the Possession Recorder, select Stop Recording in the Context menu. or hold L1 and press the circle button to quickly scope out. You can also tweak the possession recorder with L1 and the square button. It has exactly the same options as the action recorder. Experiment with the recorder and the different tweak options. Remember, you can see more info about the tweak settings by hovering over them for a few seconds. Close the tweak menu by pressing L1 and the circle button anywhere over it. Once you're done editing, switch over to play mode to test out the completed scene. Then Connie can navigate to the last platform and help Cuthbert through the door to complete the tutorial. In this tutorial, you're going to learn all about the exciting world of logic. Pay no attention to Cuthbert. It's not as complicated as it sounds. I promise. Let's check out the scene. See the buttons on the platforms in front of our good friend Connie? They activate the bridges that will take her to the next platform. At least that's what they're supposed to do. To get them working, you'll need to connect them to the gadgets that control them. You can't see gadgets when you're in play mode, but they let you do all sorts of useful things in edit mode. You can tell gadgets apart by their color and icons. Green gadgets are sensors and inputs. This one is what we call a trigger zone. It's one of the more versatile gadgets. It can trigger other gadgets when it detects something in the scene. Like in this case, Connie standing on the button. Hi, Connie! If you select the gadget with X, you'll be able to see its detection zone. That's it, right there above the button. Press the circle button to deselect the trigger zone, and let's look at the next gadget. Pink gadgets are movers and outputs, meaning they make things happen in the scene. This particular gadget is a rotator, and it's connected to the first bridge. Click R3 to start time, and let's see what it does. Well, not a lot right now by the looks of it. That's because the rotator is switched off. You can tell because the gadget is dim at the moment. But if we connect these two gadgets together, we can turn the rotator on using the trigger zone. In the next step, I'll show you how. Before we start connecting things, make sure you can see both gadgets. You'll notice they have ports sticking out of their sides. Ports on the left are inputs, and the ones on the right are outputs. Hover over the output port on the trigger zone now. You'll see the word detected appear. That means that when the trigger zone detects something, this output will send a signal. Before it can send that signal to the rotator, though, we'll need to connect them with a wire. So hover over the detected output and press R2 or X. you'll notice your imp is now tethered to the port by a wire. Power ports have appeared on the gadgets too. It's these ports that switch gadgets on or off. OK, drag the wire over to the rotator gadget. Now hover over the power port at the bottom, then press R2 or X. Once the gadgets are connected, the wire will disappear automatically. That way, your scene won't get cluttered. After all, you don't want wires all over the place. You can see the wire again by hovering over either gadget. OK, time to test our connection out. So let's switch over to play mode in the options menu. That's more like it. Now the trigger zone detects Connie when she stands on the button and activates the rotator on the bridge. As soon as she steps off, the rotator stops working. You can use the button to get the bridge lined up with the platform. Once Connie can make it to the second platform, you can head back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Now that we've connected the rotator, let's take a look at the second platform. See the yellow gadget on its side? This gadget isn't a sensor or an output. It's called a microchip. Microchips are used to organize logic in scenes. You can think of them as boxes of gadgets and wires. Let's have a look inside. Hover over this one with your imp. Hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group of objects. This window is the microchip's canvas. And if these gadgets look familiar, it's because they're two rotators. Each one controls half of this jointed drawbridge. Try to connect the output from the trigger zone to the power ports on the rotators. You can create multiple wires from the same output. Or you can clone wires in the scene by holding L1, then grabbing them with R2. Clone the wire near the rotator to create a new wire from the trigger zone. Once you've connected the trigger zone to the second rotator, switch over to play mode and make sure it's all working. OK. Jumping on the button now will activate the trigger zone and raise the drawbridge so that you can cross over the... Oh! Wait a minute. The bridge has dropped down before Connie could cross. That's because the signal to the rotator stopped sending as soon as Connie stepped off the trigger zone. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. In the next step, I'll show you how to make signals stay on. If we want the bridge to stay up, we'll need to add a gadget between the trigger zone and the rotator to keep it activated. We can do this with a counter. So let's go into the assembly menu. Press square to open it if it's closed. Select the gadgets menu with X. You'll find the counter in the logic and processing section. The gadgets in this menu take an input signal and change it in some way before sending it on. Go ahead and select the counter. Its icon is a tally counter. Now you can see the gadget on your imp. Hover over the microchip and it will snap to the canvas. Press R2 or X to stamp the counter onto the microchip, then press circle to unequip it. The counter gadget counts up or down whenever it receives a signal through its inputs. By default, It starts its count at 0 and has a target of 1. Once it reaches that target, it sends a constant signal through its counter-full output port. Before we connect it though, let's tidy up the wires connecting the trigger zone to the rotators. Just hover over them and press triangle to delete them. Now press R2 or X over the detected output of the trigger zone to create a new wire. Connect it to the increase count input port on the counter. That's the port with the plus sign icon. Now when the trigger zone is activated, the counter will go up to 1. And, this is the important part, it will stay at 1 even after the trigger zone deactivates. Now hover over the counter-full output port of the counter. This port sends a signal when the counter reaches its target. Create a wire with R2 or X and connect it to one of the rotator's power ports. Then do the same for the other one. Time to switch to play mode and try out our new connections. When you're happy everything's working as it should, return to edit mode and move on to the next step. Just one more bridge for Connie to cross. As you can see, we have another microchip on the platform, so let's open it up. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. Okay, looks like we have everything we need here. But Connie's an adventurer, so how about we make this last bridge more challenging? Adding a timer to the logic should get the adrenaline going. Once Connie activates the button, she'll only have a few seconds to cross before the bridge drops back down. Let's head back to the assembly menu. If it isn't already open, press square. Then go into the gadgets section. You'll find the timer in the same place as the counter, the logic and processing section. Its button has a clock face on it. Now go ahead and stamp the timer gadget onto the microchip with R2 or X. Then unequip it from your imp with the circle button. Now let's take a closer look at the timer's inputs and outputs. You can see their names by hovering over the ports. The first input is a start timer port. Once this receives a signal, it will start the clock. The second one is reset timer, which sets the time back to 0. Over on the output side, we have timer finished and timer output. Timer finished sends a signal when the timer reaches the required number. It's set to 5 seconds by default. Timer output is a little more sophisticated. The signal it sends represents the timer's current progress. If, let's say, it's only halfway to its target, the signal it sends will be half strength. So how do we connect this so the bridge only stays up for a few seconds? Well, we need the bridge to be raised while the timer is running. So create a wire on the timer output with R2 or X. Remember how we used the counter on the previous platform? We can use one here too. Just like before, connect the wire to the counter's increase count input. Then connect the counter full output to the rotator's power port. Time to see if it works. Click R3 to test it out. As you can see, since the timer isn't connected to a trigger yet, the clock starts ticking as soon as we play the scene. The bridge goes up, but doesn't drop down when the timer finishes. That can only mean one thing. There's a problem with the logic. If you'd like to figure it out for yourself, feel free to check the gadgets and see what's wrong. Or move on to the next step and we'll go through it together. So let's take a look at why the bridge stayed up after the timer finished instead of going back down. Remember how we used the counter earlier to remember the signal from the trigger zone? Well, now it's remembering the signal from the timer, so we need to make it forget that once the timer finishes. Let's go over to the counter gadget. Hover over the inputs to see their names. This one here is Reset Count. It'll put the counter back to 0, which will turn off the rotator. So all we need to do is connect it to the timer, but to which output? Aha, there we go. We can use the timer finished output. Hover over it and create a wire with R2 or X. Then stretch the wire over to the counter and connect it to the reset count input. But we also need to reset the timer, otherwise the logic will only work once. So let's get another wire from the timer finished output and connect this one to the reset timer input. You'll recognize it by the rewind symbol on it. All we have left to do is to connect the trigger zone to the start timer port so Connie can activate it. Okay, that was a lot of connections. So before we test it out, let's go over the logic we've made. First, Connie activates the trigger zone, which sends a signal to start the timer. Once the clock starts running, the timer output becomes active. This tells the counter to count up. That then turns on the rotator and raises the bridge. Now this is where the really clever stuff kicks in. After 5 seconds, the timer finishes its count, which activates the timer finished output. This in turn resets the counter to 0, cutting the signal to the rotators and lowering the bridge. And let's not forget, it also resets the timer, so the logic could be triggered again if Connie didn't cross the bridge the first time. Isn't logic exhilarating? Take your time digesting all that. Logic is easier to read if you route your wires neatly. Grab wires with X to change their paths. You can also move the gadgets around by grabbing them with R2. Feel free to test it out. So let's take a look at why the bridge stayed up after the timer finished. Will connect K. That was a lot of connections. So before connect the trigger zone to the K. That was a lot of connections. So before we test it out, let's go over the logic we put becomes act. Rotator if Connie all that. X to change their paths. All that. Logic is easier to read if you route your wires neatly. Grab wires with X to change their paths. You can also move the gadgets around by grabbing them with R2. Feel free to test it out in play mode, but don't leave the scene just yet. I have one more thing to show you. So, on the third platform, we've set up a timer that makes the bridge drop after 5 seconds. But I think that might be too easy for a seasoned pro like Connie. Let's make it a little bit more challenging. First, if you're in play mode, switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Hover timer. If we lower this, then hold X. Doesn't have to make things now cool while hold L1, the scene in play mode. Hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. When you're all set, take Connie to the last platform and walk through the door to complete this tutorial.
Hi, I'm Mark, Creative Director of Media Molecule, and I'm going to present a simple masterclass that will hopefully help you use some of what you've learned so far and turn that into an entire game. I'm going to be focusing on a remix of the Dreamiverse Dash game. That means take a copy of something, mess around with it, which is always a really good way to learn. I will be reiterating some of the basics that you may have already learnt, but basics make for strong foundations, and strong foundations make for strong structures. Yes. So, first of all, try playing the game, get familiar with it, and when you get past the finish line, we'll dive in and start tinkering. Okay, let's start by making sure we feel comfortable navigating.
It's a beautiful day in the Dreamiverse, so Cuthbert's heading out for a stroll. It's a hard life being a cube. But Connie can't resist a practical joke, so she's dreamt up a spooky surprise for Cuthbert. She's gonna need your help to pull off this hair-raising prank. With a little lighting and atmosphere, we can transform this scene. But let's do a bit of redecorating first. Go to the assembly menu and select the search button with X. I've prepared a little collection of eerie elements for you to use. Open up the collection with X. Start by stamping a moon in the sky. Then stamp as many gravestones, crows, and flaming skulls as you want. Just make sure you don't block the path. And don't stamp any spooky doors. We won't need one until later on. These spindly trees are made from paint strokes, which means they don't cast shadows. Delete them with the triangle button and replace them with the spooky tree in the collection. Once you're happy with the spook levels, move on to the next step, where I'll show you how to change the lighting in the scene. To make the sky look like it's nighttime, we can use a sun and sky gadget. Go to the assembly menu and select Gadgets. Take a look in the cameras and lighting section. Here's where you'll find the sun and sky gadget. Its icon is a sun and a cloud. Select it with X and then stamp one above the garden using R2 or X. We only need one, so unequip the gadget with circle once you've stamped it. Sun and sky looks quite different to most gadgets. It's round instead of square, and it also has these two gizmos attached to it. Unlike most gadgets, the sun and sky gizmos are always visible. The ball on top of the gadget represents the sky image that's projected around the scene. Grab it with R2 to move the sky image, or hold L2 to rotate it using the motion sensor function or the sticks. Look at how the sky changes. The smaller gizmo controls the sun brightness, position and size. Grab the sun gizmo with R2. The sun gets brighter the closer it is to the sky gizmo. You can also move the sun around the gadget to change its position in the sky. This also changes the direction of the sunlight. The sun is the main light source in the scene. You can resize the sun using the up and down directional buttons while hovering over the gizmo. Resizing the sun doesn't affect its brightness, it just makes it appear larger or smaller in the sky. Try out the gizmos and get a feel for how they change the sky. You can always undo any changes with the left directional button. Start the next step when you're ready to continue. Using gizmos lets us quickly experiment with different sun and sky settings. But for some deeper control, we can use the gadget's tweak menu. Hover over the gadget, hold L1, then press square to open its tweak menu. The Sun and Sky tweak menu has 2 pages, one for the sun and one for the sky. The first page is Sun Properties. It has all the settings we changed with the gizmo, as well as a few options that are only available in the tweak menu. Sun Visible determines whether the sun can be seen in the sky, and Cast Shadows controls whether its light casts shadows. We're creating a night sky, so deselect Sun Visible. It's the button with the eye icon. Hiding the sun doesn't turn it off completely, though. It'll still emit light in the scene, even when it's not visible, you just won't see it in the sky. You can change the colour of the sun using the colour picker. Hover over the colour picker and you'll see a ring around the edge and a triangle in the centre. Grab the ring with X and move the dial to change the colour. Grab the triangle in the middle to change the shade. A bluish purple should set the scene nicely. It's starting to feel a lot more like nighttime now. In the next step, I'll show you how to adjust the sky. If you've closed the Sun and Sky tweak menu, open it up again with L1 and square. The second page of the tweak menu, Sky Properties, contains all the options for editing the sky. Its icon is a cloud. Select it with X. The tweak menu gives you more options than the gizmo. The first slider picks an image for the sky. Cycle through them by pressing the up and down directional buttons. Choose one that fits the gloomy scene. Use the sky gizmo to rotate the sky image. Find a position you like. The sky is made of flecks. You'll know all about flecks if you've played the painting tutorial. You can pick a style for the sky using the Sky Fleck type slider. The next 2 sliders control sky brightness and saturation. If you turn the brightness down to 0, your sky will be pitch black. But if you make it a bit brighter, you'll still be able to see some of the sky's colour and detail. To change the colour of the sky, you can use the colour picker. It works just like the one we use to change the sun colour. Grab the outer ring with X to change the colour, then grab the triangle in the middle to change the shade. But if you've set the sky brightness or saturation to 0, you won't see any changes to the sky colour. Experiment with the tweak menu settings and create a spooky night sky. Then start the next step when you're ready to continue. When creating a dark scene, it can be tricky to see what's going on. You could end up completely lost in a scene. If you do find yourself stumbling around in the dark, there's a useful guide you can use, which will temporarily turn off all the moody lighting. Go to the Assembly menu, then select Guides with X. Look for Studio Lighting, then select it with X to turn it on. That's better, isn't it? Now we can see everything properly again. Studio lighting fills the scene. Temporarily turn off all the moody lighting. Go to the Assembly menu, then select Guides with X. Look for Studio Lighting, then select it with X to turn it on. That's better, isn't it? Now we can see everything properly again. Studio lighting fills the scene with a bright, ambient light. Any lighting, grading or fog will be disabled so you can see exactly where everything is and what it looks like. Deselect the Studio Lighting button to turn all your atmospheric gadgets back on. Studio lighting is only active in edit mode, so the scene will still be dark and spooky when we go into play mode. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode and start the next step. The sun and sky gadget isn't the only way to light a scene. You might have noticed that there's a light gadget in the scene. Light gadgets can be used to create more sophisticated lighting, or to illuminate specific areas or objects. If you can't see it properly, just check that you don't have studio lighting switched on. Grab the light with R2 to move it around. Or grab it with L2 and use the motion sensor function to rotate it. You can add more lights to the scene from the Assembly menu. Go to the Gadgets menu, then open Cameras and Lighting. Select the Light gadget with X and stamp one in your scene, then press Circle to drop the gadget from your imp. If you select the light with X, you'll reveal its gizmo. This cone-shaped gizmo shows the angle and range of the light. Hover your imp over the edges of the cone and grab them with R2. Move your imp to widen the angle or extend the range of the light. You can grab the white dot at the end of the cone to change the range, angle and direction all at the same time. You can move and rotate the whole light independently of the gadget by grabbing the positional gizmo with R2 or L2. When lighting a scene, it's important to consider how the player will see it. If you pull back from the garden, you'll see that there's a camera gadget in the scene. Switch over to play mode to see how the scene looks through that camera. Having a defined viewing angle can help inform your lighting choices. So keep in mind the camera angle when you're setting up your lights. Try editing selecting your lights using the gizmos to illuminate an area of your scene. Of course, the gizmos aren't the only way to edit lights. Like everything else, lights can also be tweaked. We'll take a look at that in the next step. So let's take a look at the Light Tweak menu. Hover your imp over a light in the scene, hold L1, then press square. Lights can either be spot or diffuse. Spotlights illuminate in a specific direction, whereas diffuse lights cast in all directions. Light gadgets are set to be spotlights by default. But you can easily change their type by selecting the diffuse button. For this scene, it's better if we stick to using spotlights though. Notice the spotlight has tweak sliders for beam range and beam angle. These sliders do the same thing as the gizmos we used in the last step, but they give you more precise control. The fade angle slider changes the softness of the spot. At 0%, the spot will have a sharp edge. As you increase the slider, the edge will become softer. Deselecting the Cast Shadows button will stop the light from casting shadows. A very useful feature, but not for our spooky garden, as shadows will add to the overall atmosphere. The last two sliders, Use Image and Image Blur, allow you to project an image with the light. Images can be used to break up the light and add texture, making it look like it's coming through clouds or trees. Hover over the Use Image slider and use the up and down directional buttons to cycle through the images. Find one that suits the scene. This one looks good. The Image Blur slider can soften the image for a more subtle effect. When you've finished tweaking the light, close the tweak menu using L1 and circle. Now you've set up one light, you can clone it and use it in other parts of the scene. Think about where light would naturally be coming from in the scene. The moon or the fires, for example. When you've finished lighting your scene, head back to edit mode for the next step, where I'll show you how to add fog. Now we're going to literally add some atmosphere to the scene using a fog gadget. Close any tweak menus you may have open and press circle to deselect everything in the scene. Open the assembly menu. Press square if it's closed. Select gadgets, then cameras and lighting. The fog gadget icon looks like a cloud. Select it with X. We'll use this gadget to create some low-lying mist in the garden. Stamp a fog gadget somewhere in the garden with R2 or X. How about around one of the gravestones? Once you've done that, press circle to drop the gadget from your imp. To edit the fog, we'll use its gizmos. Select the gadget with X to reveal them. The zone shows you the area that will be foggy. You can grab the zone with R2 to extend it. Look closely and you'll notice that the fog gadget actually has two zones. The outer zone is the fog's fall-off zone. To adjust the fall-off, you'll need to hold L1 before grabbing the edges of the zone. Have a go now. Hold L1, then grab the zone with R2 to edit the fall-off zone. In the fall-off zone, the fog becomes gradually less and less dense until it's completely dissipated. Extend it to make the fog fade away gradually, or pull it in to have a tight ball of fog instead. Above the gadget, you'll find a position or gizmo. Use it to move the zone independently of the gadget. In the next step, we'll tweak the fog to change its colour and density. The fog is so thick I can barely see Connie. Let's see if we can improve its look in the tweak menu. Hold L1, then press square over the gadget. The fog's tweak menu has two pages, Properties and Zone Size. On the Properties page, use the fog density slider to thin out the fog a little. There's also a colour picker if you want to change the colour of the fog. Adjusting the various noise sliders is another way of changing the fog's appearance. Increasing noise strength will vary the density of the fog, making it appear patchier. The noise scale makes the patches larger or smaller, and the noise speed slider adds movement to the fog for a billowing look. There's also a slider to add glow to the fog. Add just a tiny bit of glow to make the fog look like it's catching the light. Now let's look at what the Zone Size tab has to offer. Select it at the top of the tweak menu. You can use the sliders on this page to adjust the zone size and zone fall-off, just like you could with the zones themselves. You can also change the shape of the zone in the tweak menu. Change the zone's shape to cube, then use the sliders or the gizmos to create a layer of ground fog. Doesn't that look good? In the next step, we'll add some colour grading and effects. The garden is looking very spooky now. The finishing touches will be to add some grading and effects. Grade and effects changes the look of the whole scene. It's a bit like adding a photo filter. Let's take a look. Open the assembly menu. Press square if it's closed. In cameras and lighting, look for the grade and effects gadget. The icon is an instant photo with some sparkles on it. Select it with X, then stamp one anywhere in your scene. There are no gizmos for this gadget, so open its tweak menu to explore the settings. Grade and Effects is a powerful gadget with a handful of tweak menu pages. The first page, Light and Colour, has settings for brightness, contrast and saturation. Try using the sliders to refine the nighttime look of the scene. If the grass still looks a bit too green, we can fix that by easing off the saturation. Use the brightness and contrast settings to bring out the shadows. Ooh, I'm getting chills. Everything in Grade and Effects changes the look of the scene in some way. You'll be able to figure out what most things do just by experimenting with them. Take a look through the rest of the tweak menu to see the gadget's full potential. On the colour tinting page, you can individually tint the shadows, midtones and highlights of the scene. Screen effects add filmic touches like vignette, lens flare or grain. When it comes to grading an effect, there's no right or wrong answers. It's all about creating a look that suits your scene. Most of the time, less is more, but it can be fun to test the extremes too. Remember, you can always undo using the left directional button, and you can reset any tweak slider by hovering over it with your imp and pressing triangle. Or use the studio lighting guide to hide all the effects. To complete the tutorial, you'll need to stamp the spooky door in the scene. You can find it in the tutorial collection. Once you've placed the door, head into play mode. Walk Connie through the spooky door to see what Cuthbert thinks about the garden's new look.
There's nothing quite like sculpting something from scratch. But you'll need a good grasp of the tools to avoid coming unstuck. So let's get down to it. Maybe Cuthbert will learn something too. Go to the Assembly menu. Press the square button to open it if it's closed, and select the Modes menu with the X button. Select Sculpt Mode with X. Its icon has some 3D shapes on it. Every time you enter Sculpt Mode from the Modes menu, a new sculpture will be created. You'll also notice that when you're in Sculpt Mode, everything outside the sculpture will be blurred and greyed out. This is to help you focus on what you're creating. You can adjust visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the Options menu. When you first enter Sculpt Mode, the Shapes menu will open automatically and the Smear Shape tool will be equipped to your imp. Try smearing a shape now by holding R2 and moving your imp around. Now that's out of your system, undo all of it by using the left directional button. By using this tool, we'll help Connie get across the first gap. Move your view a bit closer to the action, looking side on at the space between the platforms. Make sure you can see the platforms and that your imp can reach them. We want to build an organic structure for Connie to walk on, so let's pick an appropriate shape. Select one from the Shapes menu, and you'll see it on the end of your imp. Use the up and down directional buttons to scale it to an appropriate size. While you have a shape on your imp, you can use the grab cam to zoom in and out. Just hold R1 and use the left stick. Now position your imp next to the platform on one side of the gap. Then hold down R2 and use the motion sensor function or the left stick to smear your shape in the gap so that Connie can walk on it. If you want to have another go at it, just undo using the left directional button. Feel free to press and let go of R2 as many times as you want. Each press will create a new edit within your sculpture. Bear in mind that all the edits you make are part of a single sculpture, even if they aren't connected. This means that in assembly mode, they'll behave like a single object. Why not try out different shapes to see what works best? Try holding L2 as you sculpt and use the left and right sticks to rotate the shape. Maybe try making something like a rock formation or a tree trunk. The cool thing is, sculptures are automatically physical, so they can be walked on by puppets like Connie immediately. When you want to try it out, switch to play mode in the options menu and get Connie to walk around on your sculpture. When you're happy to move on, go back to edit mode and proceed to the next step. What happens when we want to edit an existing sculpture rather than start a new one? Let's investigate. When we went into play mode, we were taken out of sculpt mode. When you're in assembly mode, scope back into your sculpture. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group. Have a go at it now. Now we're here, let's try editing the shapes you've already made. To move or rotate shapes, unequip the Smear Shape tool by pressing circle. This automatically equips the Move tool. You might notice most of the movement controls in Sculpt mode are the same as in Assembly mode. Grab and move shapes with R2, rotate them using L2 and the sticks or the touchpad. This made. To move or rotate shapes, unequip the Smear Shape tool by pressing circle. This automatically equips the Move tool. You might notice most of the movement controls in Sculpt mode are the same as in Assembly mode. Grab and move shapes with R2, rotate them using L2 and the sticks or the touchpad. You can hold L1 and move with R2 to clone your shapes or scale them with the up and down buttons. You can even repeat clone. But unlike assembly mode, you can't select things with X in sculpt mode. What happens? Investigate. Back into your sculpture. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group. Have a go at it now. Now we're here, let's try editing the shapes you've already made. To move or rotate shapes, unequip the Smear Shape tool by pressing circle. This automatically equips the Move tool. You might notice most of the movement controls in Sculpt mode are the same as in Assembly mode. Grab and move shapes with R2, rotate them using L2 and the sticks or the touchpad. You can hold L1 and move with R2 to clone your shapes or scale them with the up and down buttons. You can even repeat clone. But unlike assembly mode, you can't select things with X in sculpt mode. Now try moving, rotating, and scaling your individual shapes. If you want to smear some more shapes, just go to the Shapes menu and select a shape to sculpt with. Selecting a shape will automatically equip the last sculpting tool you used. Now you can play around at sculpting with different shapes. Don't forget that you can undo and redo at any time. If you accidentally scope out, you can scope back into your sculpture by hovering over it with your imp and pressing L1 and X. In the next step, I'll show you how to colour your sculpture. You've probably noticed by now that all your sculptures are orangey brown, like clay. That's the default colour, but you can sculpt with any colour you like. If you're in assembly mode, hover over your sculpture with your imp, then hold L1 and press X to scope back into it. Next, head to the Colours section in the Sculpt menu and press X over a colour group to see the different shades. Choose a colour, any one you like. And as if by magic, the shape on your imp is now the colour you chose. Any new shapes you make will be that colour, but the old shapes are still brown. Luckily, we can also colour shapes after we've created them, using the spray paint tool. Go to the Sculpt menu and open the Tools section with X. Then select the Spray Paint tool, which has a spray can icon. Now your imp will have an outline of the current shape on its tip. Intersect the shape with your sculpture and you'll see the spray paint colour appear on it. Hold R2 to apply the spray paint to the shapes. You can try out different colours and shapes to completely change the look of your sculpture. If you want to make it easier to keep your imp on the surface of the sculpture, you can use the Surface Snap guide. You can find Surface Snap in the Sculpt Guides menu. Select it with X to turn it on. There's a Guides menu in every mode, though not all guides are available everywhere. You can also change the finish of your sculpture using the Finishes menu. The Coat, Style and Effects tutorial has more on finishes if you're curious. By now, you should have an organic-looking form, and it'll be whatever colour your imagination conjured up. If you switched on Surface Snap, switch it off in the Guides menu before continuing. Just select the button with X to turn it off. Then, when you're ready, proceed to the next step. All these smeared shapes are creating one single sculpture, even if there's space between them. But you can also use the smear tool to remove from the sculpture instead of adding to it. To do that, we need to set the tool to subtract. Scope into your sculpture if you haven't already with L1 and X. When the Smear Shape tool is equipped to your imp, you can press the triangle button to make it subtract. You'll notice that your imp turns into an outline. The shape on your imp becomes an outline too. You can now use the Smear tool to cut into your sculpture. Try using different shapes to see what effect they have. For a really cool effect, try subtracting with a different coloured shape on your imp. How good is that? You can switch the tool between add and subtract by pressing the triangle button. Why not play around with the tools a bit and try to make a dramatic or interesting looking form? When you're happy with its shape, go into play mode and see if you can get Connie across it. If you need to edit it, just come back to edit mode via the options menu. Don't forget to scope back into your sculpture using L1 and X. When Connie has successfully crossed the first gap in play mode, switch back to edit mode, then go to the next step. Smearing shapes can be a messy business. Sometimes you just want to create neat sculptures. Luckily, there are ways to do that. So go to the Assembly menu and select Sculpt in the Modes menu. This will create a new sculpture. Now let's practice sculpting an architectural structure over the second gap. To help us build a neater bridge, open the Guides section of the Sculpt menu. In Guides, switch on Grid Snap by pressing X over it. You'll see a number appear next to the button. That's how big the grid squares will be. You'll notice the white dotted grid in the scene. The spacing of the dots shows the tightness of the grid. They will change orientation depending on your point of view. We'll leave it on the default setting for now. You can experiment with it later. Now try making a colourful sculpture using the Smear and Move tools and the Colours menu. This'll just be a practice one, so don't spend too long on it. We'll delete it and make an even better one in a minute. You'll notice that it's much easier to keep your shapes neat and straight this time. That's because Grid Snap is active. It makes your tools and objects snap to the grid. It also helps you rotate precisely. Try it out using L2 or the touchpad. With Grid Snap on, objects rotate 45 degrees at a time. You can rotate the shape on the end of your imp before you stamp it, or use the Move tool to rotate shapes that are already placed. When you're comfortable sculpting with Grid Snap, continue to the next step. If we want to make a super neat bridge, there's another guide we can use. If you're still in sculpt mode, scope out of it with L1 and circle. Once you're in assembly mode, delete your sculpture with triangle. Go to the Modes menu. Click the Sculpt Mode button to start a new sculpture. Now we're in sculpt mode, the Guides menu will have different options. Open the Guides menu and switch on the Mirror Guide. Don't worry about the two additional options. Let's investigate them later. Also, check that Grid Snap is still turned on. Now select the Smear tool in your chosen colour and shape. The Mirror Guide will always centre on the first shape you make. That's why we started a new sculpture. Now, move your view so you can see all of the second gap, and your imp can reach it. If you need to, use the grab cam to zoom out a little from the shape on your imp. Now stamp your first shape right in the centre of the gap to enable the mirror guide. Then smear your shape from the centre over to the edge of the gap where it meets the platform. You'll see that your sculpt is mirrored, so you only have to make half of the bridge, and it'll be nice and symmetrical, leaving you to focus on making it fabulous. Carry on sculpting and carving your bridge until you're happy. Test it in play mode. And when Connie is over the second gap, return to edit mode via the options menu. When you're back in edit mode, switch off the mirror guide. You can also switch off grid snap if you want, before moving on to the next step. Now we need to create a bridge across the last gap. For that, we're going to use the mighty stamp tool. First, we'll need to create a new sculpture by going to sculpt mode via the modes menu. Now that you're in sculpt mode, make sure you've switched off the mirror guide before you continue. You'll be equipped with the smear shape tool by default, so you'll need to switch to the stamp shape tool. You can find stamp shape in the sculpt mode tools menu, next to smear shape. Its icon is a simple square. You can quickly switch between the stamp and smear tools using L1 and triangle. Or you can set stamp shape to be your default sculpting tool in the My Preferences menu. That way, stamp shape will be automatically equipped when you start a new sculpture. Stamping shapes is a bit like stamping objects from the Dreamiverse. With the stamp shape tool, you only stamp one shape at a time, no matter how long you hold R2 or X. This has additional benefits too, which you'll see later. Now select the cube in the Shapes menu, then stamp one at the side of the gap. We're almost there, Connie! Open the Sculpt Tools menu again, and this time pick the Stretch tool. Its icon is a double-ended arrow. When Stretch is selected, hovering your imp over a shape will cause an arrow gizmo to appear. Hover over the side of the cube that's facing the opposite platform. Press and hold R2 when the arrow is showing, and use your imp to stretch the shape across the gap. Nice. Let go of R2 when you're done stretching. It's not a very exciting bridge right now, but I've got something great to customize it with soon. You can stretch any shape you've sculpted, regardless of what shape it is. Spheres, cones, and even donuts can be stretched. You can even stretch subtracted shapes, but only at the points where they intersect with the sculpture. Have some fun with the stretch tool, but don't go to play mode just yet. When you're ready to take this bridge and your sculpting skills to the next level, continue to the final step. So far, I've shown you a few ways to edit the shapes you've already sculpted. But there's also a way to edit the shape before stamping or smearing. First of all, make sure you're still scoped into the sculpture. If not, hover over the bridge, hold L1 and press X to scope in. Also, make sure that you're using the stamp shape tool and not the smear shape. Next, choose a shape from the Shapes menu and select what color you want it to be. Now move the new shape right next to the bridge so that they're touching. Use the grab cam to make sure the shape is in contact with your bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu. The buttons vary a little depending on which tool and shape you're using. The Shape Editor for the Stamp tool has quite a few options. We're only interested in one for now, the most exciting one, Soft Blend. The icon is the one with the two circles blending together. If the option isn't there, just check that you have the Stamp Shape tool equipped and not Smear Shape. This is important. Next to the icon, there's a slider and a toggle button. Sliders in the Shape Editor are round, which may seem unusual, but they work just like the sliders in tweak menus. The blend amount to there for the before stamp over the from the Shapes menu and select what color you want it to be. Now move the new shape right next to the bridge so that they're touching. Use the grab cam to make sure the shape is in contact with your bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu. The buttons vary a little depending on which tool and shape you're using. The Shape Editor for the Stamp tool has quite a few options. We're only interested in one for now, the most exciting one, Soft Blend. The icon is the one with the two circles blending together. If the option isn't there, just check that you have the Stamp Shape tool equipped and not Smear Shape. This is important. Next to the icon, there's a slider and a toggle button. Sliders in the Shape Editor are round, which may seem unusual, but they work just like the sliders in tweak menus. The Blend Amount slider affects how much the shape will blend with other shapes nearby. Try holding X on the slider and moving your imp up and down. This is how you get some truly amazing shapes. The Hard Blend toggle switches between hard and soft blends. Toggle between the two options with X to see the difference it makes. To close the Shape Editor, just press Circle. Now have a play with your blendable shape. You can only blend shapes that are part of the same sculpture. So if you can't see any blending on your shape, scope into the sculpture with L1 and X.
You can make some very cool shapes using blending. Try blending subtracted shapes too.
Experiment with different shapes and blends on your bridge. Make it really fancy. You can jump back into the Shape Editor with L1 and Square. You can use the Shape Editor in any of the sculpting tools. Try using Soft Blend with the Spray Paint tool. To exit the Shape Editor and return to sculpting, just press Circle. When you've got the hang of the Shape Editor and you're happy with your bridge, try it out in play mode and get Connie to Cuthbert. Take Connie through the door to finish the tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll master paint mode. Uh-oh. Looks like Connie's having a bad day. Cuthbert got a bit handy with the lawnmower and mucked up her garden. Sorry, Connie. Let's paint her a lovely new one in paint mode. So, to explain, everything you see in dreams is made up of little splats called flecks. They can be big, loose and painterly, or small, tight and smooth. In paint mode, we deal with strokes, like real-life painting. Strokes are lines of flecks that you draw in 3D space using your imp. Let's make some now. Go to the assembly menu. If it's closed, just press the square button to open it. Then open the modes menu with X. It's this little group of icons. In the modes menu, select paint mode. It has an icon with a paint squiggle. When you enter paint mode, you'll go straight into the flex menu. And the brush flex tool will be equipped to your imp. See? There's a fleck on the tip of your imp. When you're painting, everything else goes blurry and black and white to help you focus on what you're creating. You can adjust the visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the options menu. Try pressing and holding R2 while you move your imp around. And look at that! You're painting. Your imp creates a paint stroke made of a trail of flecks. Try changing how hard you press R2 as you paint. With the brush fleck tool, changing the pressure on R2 affects how opaque the flecks are. So if you press R2 lightly, the flecks will be more transparent. Now press square to open the paint menu so that we can look at some new colours and finishes. Look at the top row of buttons in the paint menu to find them. As well as the flex menu, which is already open, there are also menus for colours and finishes there. You can use these to change the colour and finish of your flecks. Practice with the brush flex tool and make as many strokes as you like. You can always undo any mistakes with the left directional button. Once you've got a feel for painting, continue to the next step. Was that fun? Now that you've made a gorgeous painting, hold L1 and press circle to scope out of paint mode. It's just like scoping out of a group and works the same way for all creation modes. A painting is a single object created in paint mode, just like a sculpture is a single object created in sculpt mode. In assembly mode, you can move, scale, and rotate your painting. To edit the strokes in the painting, you can scope into it, just like you can with a group. Try scoping into the painting you just made. Hover over it, hold L1, then press X to scope in. When you scope into a painting, you will automatically be put back into paint mode and equipped with the brush fleck tool. Press circle to unequip the brush fleck tool. Now you can use the Move tool on the individual strokes in the painting. You can scope out of the painting again with L1 and circle. Do you fancy making some flowers for Connie's garden? Connie loves flowers. Let's start by making a leaf, and then we can work our way up to the petals. Delete your practice painting using triangle. Then enter paint mode in the modes menu. Choose a colour and a finish from the paint menu. Then choose a fleck to paint with. Use the up and down directional buttons to adjust the size of the fleck. Now paint a simple stroke. Remember, the harder you press, the more opaque the flecks will be. If you want to take another shot at it, just undo with the left directional button and try again. When you're happy with your leaf, go to the next step. Next, let's paint a stalk. In the context menu, you'll see a button with a plus sign icon. Select this button to start a new painting. For the stalk, we'll use the Drawflex tool. Open the paint menu with square if it's closed, then select the Tools menu. The Drawflex tool icon is a pencil. Select it with X. Drawflex acts more like a pen than a paintbrush. The harder you press R2, the larger the stroke gets. So if you press gently, the stroke will be quite small. When you scale the Drawflex tool, the fleck will get much bigger. That's because it's showing you the maximum size of the fleck. When you stop scaling, it reverts back to the smallest size the fleck can be. Try drawing a flower stalk with it. Have a few goes to practice. Adjust the pressure on R2 as you paint the stroke, so that the stalk tapers at the end. Don't worry about lining it up with the leaf though, we'll do that later. When you're happy with your stalk, continue to the next step. Now the exciting bit, the flower. In the context menu, select the Start New Painting button. By starting a new painting, the flower will be a separate object to the stalk. We're going to paint the petals with the Stamp Flex tool, plus a special ingredient. You can find Stamp Flex in the Paint Mode Tools menu. Select it with X, then choose a fleck, colour and finish for your flower's petals. Now for that special ingredient, the Kaleidoscope Guide. You can find Kaleidoscope in the Guides menu, which is in the top row of the Paint menu. The kaleidoscope icon looks like a snowflake. Select it with X to turn it on. Leave the settings as they are for now. You can experiment with them later. You'll now have a clump of 5 flecks on your imp. Stamp the clump in your scene. That will set the centre of the kaleidoscope. There will now be 1 fleck on your imp and 4 others floating around the centre point. Whatever you do with the fleck on your imp will be mirrored by the other 4. You might need to adjust your position to get a good view. You could also try rotating the fleck on your imp. To do that, hold L2 and use the sticks, or stroke the touchpad. You can use the up and down directional buttons to scale the flecks. Whatever you do, make a flower you like the look of. If you mess up, you can just undo it with the left directional button and try again. Add as many petals as you like. Try using different colours and sizes. You could also try using the other painting techniques you've learned. If you want to delete parts of the bloom, just unequip the Stamp Flex tool by pressing circle. Then use triangle to delete any parts you don't like. If you delete the first flecks you stamped, the Kaleidoscope Guide will still be centered on their position. With the Move tool equipped, you can also move or even clone parts of the painting. Flecks created with the Kaleidoscope Guide will always behave like a kaleidoscope, even when the guide is turned off. Go ahead and experiment. Then, when you're happy, proceed to the next step. Now we've finished painting, unequip the Stamp Fleck tool with circle. And if it's still on, turn off Kaleidoscope in the Guides menu too. Scope out of the painting by holding L1 and pressing circle. Now you can assemble the parts of the flower using the Move tool. Beautiful. Let's group the flower so it's a single object. Select all of the flower parts with X. And now select the Group button in the context menu. There, we've made the flower a single group that we can move, scale, rotate, and clone. I spy some charming plant pots. How about we put the flower in one of them? Now let's make another flower by cloning the first one. So hold L1, then grab the flower with R2 to make a clone. We don't want them all to look identical though. Let's make a different bloom. You can scope into the flower group by holding L1 and pressing X over it. Now delete the bloom from the top of the plant. Let's do something a bit different with this flower. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit the appearance of your flex. So, let's make a beautiful new bloom for this flower. Enter Paint Mode and equip the Stamp Flex tool. To make this bloom look a little different, we're going to edit the flex appearance. We can do that by selecting the Edit Fleck button in the context menu. Or use the shortcut. Hold L1 and press square to open the Fleck editor. It's the same shortcut as opening a tweak menu. The Fleck editor has sliders for altering the appearance of the fleck. They look a bit different to the sliders you see in tweak menus, but they work much the same way. Try dragging them up and down using X and see what they do to the fleck on your imp. How exciting! The fade slider adds extra flecks that fade away near the edges. The scatter slider adds extra flecks with impasto to create a more three-dimensional clump of flecks. The opacity slider makes the fleck more transparent. Once you've adjusted the sliders to your liking, simply press circle to exit the Fleck editor and start painting with your fleck. Now create a new bloom for the flower. Perhaps try turning on Kaleidoscope again. When you're finished, exit the painting by pressing L1 and circle. Move the new bloom onto the stalk and then scope out of the group with L1 and circle. When you're done, move on to the next step. Now we have some new flowers. How about a bit of rain to water them? We can do that by creating an animated stroke. Make sure you're scoped out of any paintings or groups. Then select Paint Mode from the Modes menu. For the rain, we'll use the Rule Flex tool. It's in the Paint Mode Tools menu. The icon looks like a ruler. The Rule Flex tool lets you draw straight lines made of flecks. Choose a fleck, colour and finish for your rain. Something watery. Then close the menu with Square. These flecks are going to be raindrops, so make them small using the down directional button. Move your view back from the flowers so that you can see plenty of space above them. Then position your imp at a reasonable distance above the flowers and press and hold R2. Stretch the stroke down to the grass at a slight angle, then release R2 to stamp it. This line of flex is going to be the path of the raindrop. Unequip the Rule Flex tool with Circle. Then scope out of your painting using L1 and Circle. It doesn't look like much at the moment, but in the next step, I'll show you how to make it look more rainy. To animate the painting, we need to tweak it. So hover your imp over the painting you just made. Hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. Look for the animation page of the tweak menu. The tab has a clapperboard icon. The slider at the top controls the playback speed. Grab the slider with X and pull it to the right. You won't see anything change to start with. In order to see animation, you'll need to start time by clicking R3. Use the grab cam or the sticks to get up close to the stroke, and you'll see the flexor moving along it. You can increase the playback speed to make them move faster. The next step is to switch on pulse. When pulse is on, you won't see the whole stroke. Instead, a pulse of flex will travel down it. Select the pulse button in the animation tab of the tweak menu. Its icon is a bomb. Ah yes, that looks much more like a raindrop. You can shorten the trail of the pulse using the slider below the pulse button. Shorten the trail a little to achieve a raindrop look. The drops are still a little on the slow side. Grab the playback speed slider and turn it right up. That's more like it. One raindrop isn't going to water many flowers though. There's a handy way to duplicate your painting without having to clone it loads of times. I'll show you in the next step. So now let's duplicate our raindrop and create a proper downpour. In the tweak menu of the raindrop painting, look for the Duplicates tab. The Duplicates icon is a pair of sheep, just like the clone tool. This tab is used to create duplicates automatically, based on a variety of options. The positional duplicates options determine where the copies appear. The option we want is around camera. Select it and see what happens. Wow! Now it looks like it's really raining. This setting duplicates the painting around the camera automatically, so wherever we go in the scene, it will seem like it's raining. At the bottom of the Duplicates tab are 3 sliders. They affect how many of them there are, how far apart the duplicates are spaced, and whether they are scaled randomly. Try adjusting the sliders and see if you can create an effect you like. Then close the tweak menu using the close button in the corner, or hold L1 and press circle over the tweak menu to close it. Now that we've watered the garden, let's add some finishing touches. Open the assembly menu with square, then select the search button with X. The collection for this tutorial contains lots of great things made in paint mode. There are also more plant pots and a garden shed made in sculpt mode. Use the collection to finish making Connie's garden. Stamp some plants or pots, or paint more plants of your own. Make it lovely. When you're happy with the garden, stamp the shed in there somewhere. To finish the tutorial, switch over to play mode and walk Connie through the door of the shed.